All right. So I realize it's getting a little early. We don't have the final until it's going to be open the 7th through the 14th. It's going to be on Blackboard. It's going to be 72 questions. You'll have 90 minutes to knock it out. But anyway, I want to go through a bit of a prep for it. I'm actually going to be I'm going down to Belize for just a quick 1 week trip, but during that period is when I would typically post this thing. So I'm leaving here end of the week, and anyway, if things got screwed up or I don't get a good internet connection, it's just far easier to do it right now and get it out there and kind of relieve everybody's stress. So those of you who want to study over Thanksgiving, feel free, but otherwise don't sweat it because it's not going to open until the 7th through the 14th. That's actually finals week plus a little, bonus on each end. Now, when it closes on the 14th, that's it, obviously. End of the day, finals, or midnight. I don't know. They use weird definitions on Blackboard. Just keep in mind that, late at night on Saturday night, that's when it's done. So, kind of the same sort of thing. I'm going to try and hit on the key items of the course. There's a lot of material here, and I don't know. It's very odd doing distance because you don't get much feedback from the students, obviously, and so if you do have other items that you think were important or something like that, give me some feedback. Let me know. But otherwise, I've kind of hit on the key things that I've seen from either my personal experience, training, whatever, education, and then also just examples I've seen in other people where things kind of went wrong. Employees I've had that, they're just the best people in the world, but they let their situation, and sometimes it's through no fault of their own, life threw them a few whatever, and they it didn't go the way they wanted. But you all, for most of you, this is whatever, you're young enough in your life, and you're gonna have a plan, and whether that plan will come to course, who knows? But you're gonna do your best, because if you don't have a plan, you're gonna get screwed. Things are not gonna be good. So, whatever. But it's not all about money. I mean, money is something that you hopefully won't have to worry about. So, we're going to just jump right in before I babble through this whole thing. Beneficiary. Okay, so when we're talking life insurance or anything like that, just the term beneficiary, that's the person who's going to receive the proceeds of an insurance policy or whatever. You nominate when you're getting a big mutual fund. Hopefully that thing builds up. At some point in there, you want to also nominate a beneficiary. So there's a seamless transfer when this whole thing goes away in terms of your life. Again, pretty morbid. We get there in a hurry in this course. But the important bit about that is that the person needs to know, the person who's alive, because obviously you're not going to be around to tell them. So those sorts of documents, maybe a home inventory, some of those other things, you need to have some of that stuff sort of organized and kept in a good place. And obviously, I'm not going to tell you about how you're a complete deadbeat if you don't have a will. I think you know that. So your will be in there in the same place just to make things easier. We talked a little bit about bonds. I'm just not a fan of bonds. I just find them boring as whatever, and they're very defensive in my mind. Maybe they keep up with inflation, maybe they don't. There's some people who make a lot of money in bonds, but they're bond traders. They're guys that are, not necessarily making a huge amount of money on the underlying instruments. They're making money on the speculation of the trade of those things. But they do serve a purpose. And again, just to reiterate, you have stocks and bonds are not an ownership in the company. They're just basically a loan from a corporation or from a municipality, something like that. Now, there's a specific type of bond called a convertible bond that sometimes you'll run across. And all that means is that it can be transferred back and forth. So, well, maybe whatever. It can be transferred. I'm not sure that it's always reversible, but anyway, you could switch it from shares to shares, which would be stock to bonds, or typically it's from bonds into stock within a particular company. Call feature. A call feature, again, relating to bonds, not a good thing. A call feature means you're getting a pretty good deal, that this bond is doing quite well, and the company who's issued it is almost regretting it. And because they had a call feature, they can just end this right now, and they'll say, you gave us $20,000 for this bond. Here's your $20,000 back. Deal's off. And so the problem again, if a stock runs away in price, the company can't go, oh wow, we wish we had sold that stock to you. We'd make a lot more money if we kept it for ourselves. If we kept that equity, that would be a complete foul. That doesn't happen. But in bonds, when you're making too much money, the company or the entity can go, we don't want to do this anymore, and we'll call it off. So basically, it allows the corporation to buy outstanding bonds from the current bondholders before the maturity date. Anyway, just canceling the deal. We talked about on contracts. So most everything, whether it's an insurance policy or whatever, it's some form of homeowner's policy. It's a form of a contract. And in contracts, you have little addendums, codicils. In this case, they're calling it a rider. Anyway, it just means an additional thing to the contract. So if you have just your general insurance policy, same as a homeowner's insurance policy in this case, and you have some special thing that goes outside the normal policy, you would want to capture that in writing, obviously, and that would be done through a rider. So you have a whole bunch of jewelry, a whole bunch of guns, photography stuff, whatever. You want to make sure that stuff is indeed noted and insured. So you'd explain that. Mutual funds with no sales charge. That's called a no-load fund, right? And that's what you're seeking. So anytime somebody's selling you a fund, ask them if it's a no-load. Now, if they're selling it to you, yeah, it's going to be a loaded fund because, selling, sales, commission, they're making a little something. The point is that the market doesn't really, it's not necessary anymore. There's so many, the vast majority of the mutual funds out there do not have a load. So, if somebody, some sort of solicitation, and they're trying to get you to buy a mutual fund, take it as a good thing that, yeah, they reminded me I need to buy a mutual fund, but go off and buy it directly from the company. You don't need an intermediary to make a charge, because that charge would be on the front end. They, whatever. We've looked at the examples in the course of how taking money from the front end diminishes that initial investment, which penalizes you severely when you take into account the time value of money. Okay. We talked about mutual funds. Great way of doing things. Here we've got one that's investing in rapidly growing corporations with a higher than average revenue and earnings, whatever. That would be a growth fund. So if you look at the competitive type answers, you've got an income fund. An income fund is one that's a mature company that's paying dividends, right? You've got a money market. A money market is typically based on U.S. government things like T-bills, whatever. Something that's going to be kind of a parking place. May keep up with inflation, may not, but super secure, no risk other than the risk of inflation. Anyway, here's another mutual fund. This guy's just in companies in the same industry. That's a sector fund, right? So you think medical, defense, cannabis. Pick your industry. I've got burned on a cannabis one. Well, that's not meant to be a joke, but yeah, Charlotte's Web, hippies disappointment. That stock went to pretty much zero. And so anyway, it's kind of a dangerous thing, because the reason you're getting into a mutual fund is to, I mean, it's less dangerous than being in an individual stock. And maybe I would have been fine if I would have been in a sector, the cannabis sector, but I went specifically for Charlotte's Web, and I got burned. So anyway, the beauty of a mutual fund is you spread your investment across several stocks. In a mutual fund that's a sector fund, you kind of focus it back down to a specific sector. I've got other mutual funds that are, say, across a whole industry, like SPY, which is the whole Standard & Poor's, or QQQ, which is the whole NASDAQ. That's probably, if you're not feeling super up to picking individual stocks, that might be the way to go. I'm sure there's a mutual fund out there for the Magnificent Seven, NVIDIA, Apple, Alphabet, all those companies. So anyway, mutual funds can be exciting. Somebody else has kind of done the work, packaged it, and you just review their work and you decide what works for you. Super easy companies to deal with, super easy to put up on automatic investments, and it's the way you'll go. So a mutual fund in general, just the definition of it, pools the money of many investors to invest in a variety of securities. So again, you're looking at diversification. Again, you don't make that error I did by investing in a single company. You invest in a range of companies. And maybe you've got, like I say, some sort of knowledge where you think this sector is going to go up, or this geographical region, or you think the mature companies aren't going to do well. You're going to go for growth companies, or you're going to do one of the targeted ones with a retirement date. Just whole wealth of options. But whatever you do, a mutual fund is not going to be all your money, all your eggs in one basket. It's going to be across a range of things. We didn't talk too much about this. We're switching to insurance type thing. Let's say you've got this kid, and through whoever's fault that your child didn't turn out to be so good, and so you leave town, and or maybe your neighbors leave town, and your kid knows about it, and he has a huge party in the neighbor's house and destroys it. Well, if that, like I say, he's a kid, he's not 18, and who's the parent? You are. So you could be through vicarious liability. We didn't talk about this too much, but it's the same sort of concept. Your child throws a baseball through the neighbor's window. Yeah, it's your fault. Which is completely different than a tree falling on your neighbor's house and crushing it, ruining it. That's an act of God. So I've actually had, it's kind of regrettable, but it's been a few years back, but had a huge cottonwood come down on a cabin where I had some, vacationers out there in the cabin, but I didn't get sued because I didn't knock the tree down. Now you have to be careful if you've got equipment and stuff and you created a road around there that maybe disturbed the roots or something like that. If a skillful lawyer could probably find some way that you might be responsible, but a tree blowing down on a neighbor's piece of property or structure is considered an act of God, and nobody's responsible. But lawyers can find interesting ways to make that whole concept go right away. Okay, we're looking at, you're trying to sell some stock, but you want it to go at a specific price. You're seeing it really volatile. It's trading between, like, let's say 90 and 95. And you're like, every time I look at it, it's down at 90, but I see it's bouncing around in there. I got other things to do with my life. I don't want to get emotional and just hit market order, which means it sells right then. I'm going to put a limit order. I'm going to say, sell at 95. And if that stock happens to hit 95, boom, your limit order converts to a market order and the stock is sold. If it doesn't hit 95, then nothing happens. Depends how you had it structured. If it's a day only, which is the default, that means your order went all the way away. If it's GTC, good till canceled, it means it stays in force. Typically 90 days, though, and then they'll send you a reminder saying, hey, you've got an outstanding order. Do you want to cancel it or extend it or whatever? Penny stocks. So Yeah, penny stocks are typically they are denominated in pennies, but less than a dollar is the key factor. The thing about them is this is where you know bad people kind of hang out. They love the penny stocks. If a company is trading down for a penny, something's probably gone wrong or they're brand new. If it's an existing company that's down in the penny stocks, it means their share price has been, you know, gone horribly wrong. They're probably going to get delisted off the main exchange. If they start out down in the penny stocks, most companies don't do that. If you're going to do an IPO, initial public offering, you would set your stock price at some reasonable dollar denominated figure. So stocks that exist down in the penny zone are lightly regulated by the SEC, and all kinds of bad things can happen, and people lose tons and tons of money on speculating down in that range. So for the most part, stay out of that sort of neighborhood of stocks. Another strange insurance question. Let's say we know there's a requirement in most states, in every state, to have some sort of car insurance for liability, right? If you don't want to have insurance on your own car, that's between you. But if you got a loan on it, they'll probably require you to have insurance. But if you just own the car outright and you don't want to have anything but liability insurance, you can do that. Well, since the state makes that requirement, there's a requirement that everybody has insurance available to them so that they can comply with the law. And there's some guys, obviously some folks that drunk driver kind of folks or just reckless drivers, but they still have their license. So in that intermediate phase there, between they flat have their license taken away, they need insurance. So they'll make it a condition of companies doing business in the state that they have to take a few of these bad actors. They have to take a few of these people, and that's called a assigned risk pool. Up here, they refer to it as SR22 type people. The insurance companies can pretty much charge you what they want, so it's not going to be cheap. But there is a ability for people to get insurance who, have some issues, and that falls under that assigned risk pool. Getting back into more germane stuff, will. A will is a legal declaration of a person's mind, right, as to the disposition of his property, his or hers, after death. So it only means one thing, there's you can't do a will yourself. You can't do it verbally. You can't do just something. It's going to involve compliance, basically, with the state in terms of the legal aspects of it. So it's going to necessitate a lawyer, at a minimum a paralegal, to get this thing done. Now, again, keep it general, but definitely have one. If you keep it general, it's not something that needs to be redone all the time. And keep it specific in terms of limited around your estate. You don't want to put a bunch of other, your medical wishes and some of that stuff. At least I wouldn't personally. Maybe put that in a different document, but you want your will to be simple. You don't want any disputes or any you want the judge or whoever's reviewing this thing just to look at a single page document and go, yep, that's what they wanted, here you go, done quickly, cheaply. So a couple math problems. You won't need a calculator typically. I mean, you could use one on your phone or something like that, but a lady buys and sells some stock, pays a commission stupidly, but if you paid a commission, obviously that'd come off the profits. If you got a dividend, well, how long did you get that dividend, in what period? So that would go into the math. And anyway, just a simple word problem on a stock problem. Here's a guy, he's looking for high risk, hopes of earning a relatively large profit, short amount of time. Yeah, get rich quick. So that's not typically investing, that's speculation. So there's stocks like that you can get, speculative stocks. So, and also, all the competing answers are fairly mundane. T-bills, CDs, low growth stock, low risk bond. So there's only one that stands out. let's say you have an insurance claim and it's $2,000 or something like that, but you've got a $200 deductible. That means that you only get, even though there's $2,000 worth of damage, the insurance company only writes you a check for $1,800. The 200 is your deductible. That's what you pay before they start paying. We talked about gold prices. Again, I'm not a huge fan of gold. Maybe some is good, but just be careful that you buy it, from somebody without a huge commission. So be careful on that. Now, the reason gold, and it's kind of true, like it or not, relatively speaking, people are feeling maybe a little bit more confident about the economy. At least the numbers are going up, and so you're seeing gold prices kind of go down a little bit. So, the strategy here is that, the easing of international tensions or disinflation causes gold prices to decline, okay? But can be reversed by decreased industrial demand. So also meaning that demand for the metal in industrial uses, if the economy is settling down or slowing down, will mean that gold prices will decline as well. Theoretically, when people get scared, they're going to go into risk-off assets that don't pose a risk. So they might be inclined to jump into gold, and gold should go up when people are nervous, but they decline when things are easing. When things are calm. It's how it's supposed to work, but there can be exceptions. Okay. Estate planning. What's estate planning? Well, you're dead. That's happened. So, dealing with the person's estate after death, financial security in the event of your death. All of these answers all include death. And so the one on the bottom is all of the above. So you have retirement planning, which means, you're still alive, and then estate planning. So the problem with, that delineation there is trying to figure out just how long you're going to live. So, in a perfect world, if you knew the exact date, you would, leave a horrible looking corpse, completely worn out because you live life to its fullest, and your check to the funeral home would bounce because you're completely out of money, but you don't have that sort of knowledge. So you always have some sort of buffer, hopefully, and that buffer, that extra money that's left over, but perhaps you're a good person, you left it to your children or charity or something. Anyway, that's all in your estate. Financial leverage. This means using borrowed money for investment purposes. So super normal for real estate. Real estate's an investment, and you borrow money typically because the amount, maybe not today, but if you're getting a good rate, the amount you're paying on interest is less than the property's achieving, so not a whole lot of risk. But if it's something super volatile, stocks, crypto, yeah, you can get wrecked in a hurry. Not a good idea to use margin on those. People do, and most of the time they just get stopped out, and meaning they ask for money to secure that loan. You don't have it, and they sell what you had at the bottom, and you get stopped out. Retirement, yeah, basically you need to do whatever you do, in terms of when to start. People have all sorts of misillusions or myths. Some of those are spelled out here in the answers. My cost of daily living will decrease significantly once I retire. Not typically, not if you want to live it well, and especially if you have medical issues, it could get quite a bit more expensive. People expect to live 10 years into retirement. I don't need to save all that much money. You don't know how long you're going to live. Once I retire, all my medical bills will be paid by Medicare. Nope. and my employer's pension plan will provide sufficient income. The likelihood of any of you having a good retirement plan provided by your employer are getting smaller and smaller, as that's not the norm. So here's a lady who's got some expensive photography equipment, and she needs to have a personal property floater, also termed a rider. So kind of a redundant question to probably the first one we talked about. This guy died without a will. So what's that called? Intestate, right? So probate is the court that handles this. And a codicil is one of the other answers. And codicil is like a rider, like an addendum, whatever. But intestate is the term for not having a will. This guy's got a fair amount of money. He's got a legal document that specifies how this is all supposed to be going. What's the legal process called for how this is all going to be done? That is probate. So all these, good, bad answers. Estate is what he had, all of his assets and stuff. The will was the document. The trust was where the funds from that estate went. And probate is the court that handles that, or the probate process. Here's another one. This one's looking for a fund that will become that's aggressive now, will get more conservative as she approaches retirement. That's a life cycle fund. That's one of those mutual funds I was talking about with a targeted date. So here we have a bond question. So interest rates decrease. What happens to the market value of a bond? So if interest rates decrease and you're holding a bond with the old higher rate, well, people want your bond now, right? It's more attractive. So the value of your bond increases. And here's another one on the same sort of thing, if you understand this concept. If the rates of the economy rise, a corporate bond will decrease in value, right? You're holding a bond that's paying a 3% yield, and new bonds are coming out with a 4 or 5% yield. Yeah, your $20,000 bond, if you sell it on the secondary markets, may be worth $18,000. People want the other bond. They want the new bond because it's at a higher rate. If you die without a will, the state's law of descent and distribution will become your will. And the, factors laid out in the state, it's not going to be, the government takes it all, or it goes to who. No, there's usually a thing that probably mirrors your own intentions, that you're, it's equally distributed amongst your survivors, or if you have a spouse, it all goes to them, or whatever. It may be in accordance with what you want to do. But because you didn't have a will, it doesn't mean that if it has to go to probate, it will go to probate, and it's just you lengthen the process. So even though your wishes match the state's law of descent, doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a will. Because if you don't have a will, you just created a huge legal process that was unnecessary. Illiquidity. Liquidity means getting cash, right? And so real estate is considered illiquid because it's hard to turn into cash. Real estate transactions take time. Why do you need life insurance? So that's to fill the financial needs created by the loss of the breadwinner. So again, if you think about life insurance in terms of simple terms, you will be far, far better off, And term insurance is quite easy for this process. You get the term insurance you need when you need it. You've got young kids, a lot of people dependent upon you, mortgage, all kinds of stuff that would necessitate insurance. You need lots of it. You're older, the house is paid off, kids are already established, your spouse is reliant maybe on your savings and your retirement that's already generated. You probably don't need much insurance, if any. And the good news is that's good because it'd be very expensive to buy it at that point. Another math problem. Bought some stock, sell some stock. How much money did you make? And keep in mind on any of these, that 1 year is the key thing. If it's less than a year, it's short-term capital gains. If it's more than a year, it's long-term capital gains. And the tax on it pretty much doubles if it's short-term. Here's somebody who wants to diversify, looking for above average profits. So they're thinking about a growth stock. So the other choices were small cap. Not bad, but small cap just means small capitalization. Typically they do grow faster, but the other question or the other answer to this question is growth stock. So that's specifically addressed. Blue chip stock means typically a large company. Cyclical stock, defensive stocks, they're not players. What we're talking about. This guy, he bought a vehicle and with some safety features, side airbags, anti-lock brakes. How's he managing his risk? He's reducing it. He's not avoiding it. He's not assuming it. He's not an insurance company. He's not shifting it, development. No, he's reducing the risk. How do they come up with life insurance premiums? Mortality tables. And again, it used to be just based upon your age and your gender that they did that. Now, if they've got access to your medical records and specifically your genetic history, they'll tell you kind of when you're going to die, which is pretty bad and not good for you. So keep your that information private. Okay, this guy's single, just graduated from college. What kind of investment should he be in? So corporate bonds, government bonds, growth stocks, commodities, money market funds. So commodities would be fun, but that's speculation. That's buying October sugar and doing all the futures and stuff. That's not necessarily investing, and specifically it said which investments. So somebody who's young like that, growth stocks, they're going to be volatile, but you're young and you can handle that, and you need to make some money. Insurance companies in the United States are sold through the employer. So for health insurance, that's how it's done. So definitely when you're looking at taking a job with somebody, the availability of health insurance, at least you want to go into this knowing if the company doesn't provide health insurance, how much is it going to cost me to get it on my own? And it might affect your choice of employers. So 10% yield overall on investments. Who achieves that? Not T-bills, not corporate bonds, not any of these other things. Stock market, 10% is been the average return. Here's a mutual fund company. What do they have to give you? That prospectus, right? That's the document that tells how the funds, what the goals are, what the expenses are, everything that's in there is all contained in the prospectus. Example of risk when investment does not keep up with prices. Inflation risk. So that's why, like it or not, we're being driven towards either real estate or stock market. The reason why real estate, you're saying, wait a minute, real estate doesn't, it kind of inflates with the rest of the economy, but that concept of using leverage, you're essentially buying it on margin. Because typically with the real estate transactions, you put down not much, especially if you've got a good interest rate, less than 3%, man, you don't want to pay that off. Even though you have a loan outstanding, that whole Ramsey thing of Dave Ramsey about paying everything off, I've got some cheap debt and I'm not paying it off because I can get way more than 3% investing. And so I'd be foolish to take my available money and pay off that loan. I'd rather keep it separate. Anyway, annuity, opposite of life insurance, basically. And the concept that they're talking about it. Annuity is a series of, equal payments. And the way an annuity works is as long as you keep living, your payments keep coming to you. Here's somebody who owns, let's say you own mutual funds, you own stocks. They send you what they call a proxy. So if you're, you may think, oh, I just bought, 10 shares in Apple, so now I get to go to the shareholder meeting. Yeah, not so fast. You are, those are for people who have a lot of money invested. And for the rest of you, you still have rights, but your voting rights are tied to the amount you have invested. So it's not necessarily a democracy. It's not one vote per person. It's one vote per share. And your 10 shares compared to somebody who's got 10,000 shares is not so impressive. So you get a letter in the mail for you to nominate somebody who's got some real shares to vote on your behalf, and that's called a proxy. Here's a person. He's got $3,000 per month, and he's going to put away a certain amount towards his savings on day one of the month. So that's paying yourself first. Great concept. Don't try and just say, I'll save what's left over at the end of the month. There generally won't be anything. Here's a person, 401k plan. There's an employee match. Yep. Employee sponsored retirement program. So anyway, if there's a match available, do what you got to do. And that match is can be a lot of money, especially over time. Negligence. So let's say you're at fault in an accident, but you really did something stupid here. You were, well, they would consider drunk driving to be pretty stupid, but also things around the house. You've got things buried under the snow. Dangerous items, rakes and garden tools and stuff, and somebody comes on to deliver a package and they get themselves hurt. Yeah, you failed to take ordinary or reasonable care. So if this thing does go to some sort of settlement or trial, worse, you're going to be held not only liable but negligent, which means that the charges to you will be a little more serious. We talked about different types of things with limited partnerships and full partnerships. The reason why you would be a limited partner, if you ever see that on some investment document, that's something that you want to make sure that you don't violate. A limited partner cannot have day-to-day managerial responsibilities within the company. In exchange for that, if things go horribly wrong with the company, you're not on the hook for everything. You're just on the hook for the amount of money you have invested. Peril. Back to insurance terms, that's the cause of the loss. So where this is important is if somebody comes up to your house or whatever, makes a thing to you that, hey, we're giving you this $1 million life insurance policy for, cancer. Well, a lot of people die of cancer, but you don't want a specific, cause of your death to be identified, and you want all perils. You don't care, what killed you. You want to be covered just in the event you're killed. And the same thing happens with homeowners insurance. You don't want, a specific policy that just covers wind damage because, well, was it the wind? Was it the hail? Was it the water? You want all perils, if possible. Now, there's certain things, like earthquakes, for example. Earthquakes are a peril, but perhaps you can't affordably get insurance or even find somebody to write it for you. Or if it's flood insurance, a conventional insurance company can't write it for you. That can only come through the federal government. But anyway, you want to make sure that the perils are as broad as possible and that you're covered for everything. Here's a lady, she's interested in companies that are going to be paying a dividend. So income fund. So in this case, it says equity income fund. Equity stocks, by definition, are equity. It's a position. But the income is the operative word. Losses due to negligence. Yep, liability. So, again, anytime you're at fault, that's liability. Renter's insurance. So the renter's insurance, that doesn't cover the structure. If you're renting an apartment and you have renter's insurance, it's going to be pretty cheap because all it covers are your items. It doesn't cover the landlord stuff. Landlords will often insist upon you having renter's insurance because there's typically a liability coverage that's included in there, and they want to be protected from that. So, here's a lady who's got a defective coffee maker in this case. So that's a hazard. Fire would be the peril. The hazard is this coffee maker that's defective. And if she continues to use it, knowing it's defective or been recalled, then she's negligent. But anyway, this guy received some money. He's going to spread it around a little bit. Some in stocks, some in bonds, some in foreign stocks, some in cash. That's diversification. Now, before you go too far down this, I'm making it sound like diversification is great in all cases. In my mind, not so much. Like I say, I'm not a fan of bonds. You might be, but if you put money into bonds, do so because you think there's some investment potential there, not because I want to be diversified for diversification's sake. And the other thing, he's got 15% in cash. Well, just idle cash is probably not a good idea. At least put it into a money market or some T-bill. No risk, but at least you get some interest. So anyway, diversification versus consolidation. Diversification is typically the thing to do, but don't diversify just for the sake of diversification. And then similarly, if you're diversifying in mutual funds, make sure you look at the underlying assets to make sure you're truly diversified and you don't have 10 separate mutual funds, all who have basically the same underlying holdings. So the beta of the S&P 500. So almost a trick question here. The volatility, beta is a definition of volatility, right? And it's defined by the volatility of the S&P 500. So the S&P 500, the volatility of that would be 1 because it's the defining thing. So if you look at, say, NVIDIA's, I don't know, maybe a volatility of 1.2, meaning it's 1.2 times as volatile as the S&P. And something that's 0.8 would be less volatile. But the S&P, that's the defining thing, so that is 1. Ease in which an investment can be converted to cash. So we know this. Liquidity, right? Liquidity means turning things into cash. Bond ratings, how high do they go? Yeah. So obviously it's complete grade inflation. The one with the most A's, all caps, that's how it works. And keep in mind, when you get down into B's, a grade of B, that's getting down into junk bonds. Bonds that are expected potentially to fail. Now, if they're getting a huge interest rate, you might be tempted to do that for a short time. But keep in mind that the reason why you're getting that high interest rate is because those guys look like they're probably going to default and not pay. So, legal responsibilities for another person's losses or injuries. Again, liability. Another math problem on investment. What can you use insurance for? Pretty much anything. At a minimum, you should be able to pay off the house that you had, if you're leaving that to somebody, so you're truly leaving them something. And also maybe the estate taxes, since you want to leave it to them without a huge tax bill. And then if you did well, your own endowment or charitable bequests. But and a minimum. You can use it for pretty much anything is the correct answer. Let's say you have a stock and it's something like, I don't know, I keep going back to NVIDIA, but it's pretty useful. Let's say it gets up to $1,000 and it's just awkward to deal with a stock that's that size. People who want to buy a single share need to buy it in $1,000 increments. What they'll do in that case is they've kind of let things get out of control. Usually stocks go 2-for-1 split, but in this case they did a 10-for-1 split, meaning that if you had one share of NVIDIA on the day before the split, you had one share at $1,000. The day after the split, you had 10 $100 shares. So you didn't generate any wealth by the split itself, but there is kind of a recognition that the reason they had the split was because they were doing so well. It can go the wrong way as well. Companies that are failing can sometimes try to avoid the penny stock realm by doing some reverse split, but I'm not going to go there. But that's an indication that company is pretty much going to fail. So when the stock splits, in this case it was just an even split, 2-for-1, decreases to half its pre-split price, which would be correct. We talked about junk bonds, and then when you get down into D, we're well beyond B, so we're even worse. Yeah, that's one that's in default. Not even a good speculative bid because they're not paying at all. They're in default. They've failed to make the dividend payments. So even though you're getting 20% interest, you're not, because they're not paying the 20% interest. They've defaulted on that. More liquidity. Yeah, possible disadvantage of real estate is that they are illiquid, meaning not liquid. Another question on stock splits. Yeah, doesn't necessarily mean that the stock value's increased. Just the action doesn't. It shows a trend, but the split in itself, no, you it's a simple math here. Let's say you get in a car wreck. Do you want to discuss the details with people around you? No. There'll be plenty of time for that later. Just make sure everybody's safe, and I guess warm this time of year. True facts about mutual funds. Tons of people have them. Over half the households. More than 12,000 available. There are more mutual funds than there are individual corporations to buy from. I mean, they are super, super popular. Tons and tons of money involved. Greatest growth potential. So a bank account? No. Just fractional interest rates. Corporate bonds? No. They don't like bonds either. Government bonds? Even safer, but not much in the way of growth. Same with T-bills. Just another bond. So common stock, or stock in general, equities, stock market. Another liquidity question. I'm not going to bore you with it. If you understand liquidity, you got like 5 gimme questions, so no liquidity. Yeah, there's always a risk that financial return on investment may not keep pace with inflation. That's why you need to be invested. Here's a statement about term insurance. It's right there in the definition. Term means, for a specific term, protection for a specified period of time. If you get a term life insurance for 20 years, on the 21st year you have no insurance. So plan accordingly. Either have another policy or have the nest egg to say, screw it, I don't need the insurance anymore, I'm good. Or my life is squared away enough where I no longer have that many people dependent upon me, I'm good. And I'm going to get all that money I would have paid on that insurance, and I'm going to invest it and end up far ahead in the long run. Which statement is false? Investors who purchase mutual funds are guaranteed a higher rate of return. than if they were to purchase comparable stocks. So yeah, you can. There's no guarantees, and you don't buy mutual funds because you're looking for a higher rate of return. You're typically looking for less risk. You could end up with a higher rate of return, but if you you had some incredible skill and luck, and you picked the individual stocks that did really, really well, yeah, they're gonna outperform your mutual fund because your mutual fund is a broader selection. But what the individual stocks don't offer is that diversification. It's just a more defensive position to have mutual funds, which counterintuitively may allow you to be more aggressive in terms of your investing. You wouldn't want to necessarily put it all in one huge growth company, but you might go for a mutual fund that's focused on growth. So anyway, following statements about let me see. Yeah, following statements are correct. So then they have a bunch of things about, stocks are a form of debt capital. No, they're ownership equity. Stocks must be repaid at maturity. That's not, no, you own it. You don't have to repay anything. There's no loan involved. Bonds do not have to be repaid at maturity. They do. And interest bonds must be declared. Anyway, some bogus things in there. And then bonds are a form of debt capital. That is true. Bonds are basically a loan. Who has the greatest need for life insurance? So a single person? Nope. Single, dual couple? No, they've got some redundancy there. Children? No, their parents needed the insurance. So households with small children, that's the winner. You can depend on Social Security to pay all your basic living expenses. Pretty damn basic. If Social Security does, look at the numbers and you'll see that, that would be rough to survive on Social Security alone. Doesn't mean that people don't do it, but they're not, seeing the world or taking care of all their, they're in a bad spot. So we have all these different types of insurance for vehicles. You have collision, which means you're at fault, but you still want your vehicle fixed. You had collision. You had, your liability, which meant you're insuring the other person. But you have this other type of insurance that covers everything else. It covers all these comprehensive items, So obviously the word comprehensive. So glass breakage, falling objects, hitting an animal, all that stuff is under comprehensive. Okay, so that's cool. We got it done in less than an hour. I think you probably do the test in less than an hour. You got 90 minutes to do it. So obviously you're trying to do this open book. That's not going to work. But if you study this video, I think you'll be in pretty good shape. And I think you'll be in pretty good shape financially. If you just keep in mind the big things, don't get wrapped up in a bunch of debt. Don't, especially credit card debt. If you can learn how to manage your credit cards and you can learn how to pay yourself first, and then you can, keep wants and needs in their appropriate categories, you can do well. So I hope you got something out of this course. Turn in your term project. Send me a copy of it beforehand if you're, concerned. But otherwise, if you hit the page count and you've made a paper that's tailored to your needs and it's not just a bunch of chat GPT or just a bunch of graphs that aren't kind of tied together, you'll do well. So, I do encourage you to use some of those graphs and things you might be able to pull out of some of the mutual fund sites, but at least have some verbiage, some narrative to tie it together and explain yourself. Sounds good.